Recording. Intro go. Welcome back, everyone, to the Be Advised podcast. I'm Robbie, Ron. We have a very special and interesting, on a multiple magnitudes here, I believe. We're going to learn a lot. A really great show lined up for you guys. Ron, you want to kind of segue here for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, a little weird setup. So today is March 15th, 2019, and we have a very special guest named Christopher Johnson that I've been wanting to have on for a long time. Been talking about this for months and months and months, this particular subject. And if you had to, because I try to explain this phenomenon to people, but I can't find sort of a term. Is there a term for what you're studying here?
I think it really started off with anthropology, but I mean, this specific one, the best word is catastrophe, and it sounds crazy and kind of big and grandiose, but I mean, I think it's what it comes down to. It's just a big event.
Okay, and I am a catastrophist, and I think Robbie is to some point.
Yeah.
That's the term for it, right?
Yeah,
Catastrophist.
absolutely.
You believe that there were ancient civilizations and something came along and wiped them out, an Earth event of some kind.
Yeah, a global one.
A global event, okay. So what we're going to do is, by the way, you wanted to, you belong to
We got to stay in frame.
we got a weird setup today, because so you belong to a boxing gym or something, right? Or
Yeah,
MMA?
I can do a couple of MMA situations throughout the valley. 10th Planet out of Mesa, but at the 10th Planet Phoenix, and then there's the MMA lab based right in the middle of Phoenix. Great MMA, great jiu-jitsu. Those are great places. So you guys definitely check them out. You always get the best bang. The MMA lab is probably the top 5 MMA academies in the entire world. So.
Awesome.
Nice.
Chris, do me a favor. Put that sucker right next to you.
Oh,
now.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
All right, so head over there to 10th Planet, and they'll punch you in the face.
Yeah.
Make you feel alive. All right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to open it up to Chris and let him explain what he's been studying for all this time, and it's very fascinating, very diverse subject. So
Thank you. If anything gets a little bit too pacey, you guys can please interject and kind of slow me down. A little bit about myself. I started off with anthropology. Ever since I was little, I started with Indiana Jones movies, and I was kind of inspired by that. It ended we're in Arizona. It ended at a certain university. I won't say which one, but there was a discrepancy between facts and what people wanted to portray as information, and they were trying to test me about that. And that's where my anthropology kind of study it separated. And up until about 4 years ago, I pretty much gave up on it, and there is a bunch of new information that came out that kind of linked everything that I was kind of stuck on. And this is kind of the gist of it. There's a lot more to it, but it kind of pulls you into all these different directions where you kind of get lost in it. I think that's the biggest problem with anthropology today, is there's so many different fields and there's so many different things. You can carbon date things. You can date things based upon layers of soil. And it all, in a sense, contradicts itself to make it a longer process. So what most people would understand the end of ancient civilizations, or with, a catastrophe, I guess you could say, would be the typical picture of meteors and all that falling from the sky, ending everything in one big kind of grasp. And I think we have an image to kind of go from that, and it's a little bit small, but what you're seeing is, they have the pictures of the mammoths and the people and asteroids falling from the sky, kind of ending everything. And for For a long time, this was
Kind of clicking.
What's that?
Is that clicking?
No.
Keep going. I'll fix you.
Yep. And so for a long time, people kind of gave up on this idea because they couldn't connect A to B to C. It was kind of just A to C. And A to C was something happened, everything vanished, and what was inserted was the best guesses of a lot of scientists who didn't have the information. And what you're seeing now is kind of the timeline of what happened. So you're seeing something happened where the temperature dropped about 11.5 to 13.5 thousand years ago, and then it slowly rised, or it was on a rise, and then it kind of decreased again. This is called the Younger Dryas. Up until this point, Younger Dryas has not been able to be explained, as there's all the evidence for craters are too big or too small. All the evidence for impacts just don't match up. And this is really where anthropology has hit a dead end for, I would say, from the early 1900s. It's just been like, well, this happened, we can't explain it because it's such a huge event, we will never be able to get to the bottom of it, so just accept what's there. Up until about 3 months ago. 3 months ago, there was a satellite traveling over Greenland, which is, I think this is also a coincidence that it came out at this time. If you know Greenland, it's where they harbor the seed shelter, the seed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
For the entire world. And obviously they think this because it's a very safe place. And
Go into that a little bit more for people that don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so I don't believe it. I don't know if it's the UN or if it's just an agreement with all the nations. But all the nations gathered their heirloom seeds, and they essentially made a deposit into this huge vault that's in Greenland, buried into ice cap. And what it does is ensure that in an event of a catastrophe, that our seeds and our, I don't know, I guess like our
It's like a seed vault, like when you like in those movies when you would send like all the human DNA to another planet, or to like save the human race. It's like if anything happens to the Earth, we were able to repopulate the plants of the Earth.
Absolutely, that's exactly it. It's buried deep under ice caps and the land. So this is one of the biggest things that this world has actually achieved together. This is huge. And just so happens that across the same continent, they find this huge crater. Now, this crater wasn't too big until they started trying to figure out, well, what would have happened from this crater. And this thing is 31 kilometers wide. This thing is huge. This is not just, meteor crater up in northern Arizona. This thing is no joke. And we're going to go into a little bit of the depth of it, and you can see that, this thing, it impacted, and there's a couple key things that we want to start, and I guess the biggest thing with anthropology is patterns. Things don't happen and then not happen and then happen again, or it's all about patterns. And you'll see with nature and science, it's patterns. And science is always big on, if we can create this again, then obviously this is fact. So most people think, well, all right, well, this big impact crater happened, so where's the result? We're not seeing anything. And most people will look at Africa and understand, there's not too much to see. This is the typical Africa that we see. But when you look at it from a bigger picture, from maybe a step back, you can see there's some weird things with Africa. As you can see, the northern part is the desert. You get into the central part, and it's deep forest, and it's kind of weird. You see these lines kind of tracking in the desert, and you can see it kind of looks odd, but it's such a big scale that really our mind can't grab around this thing. So I guess I didn't intro this enough to be like the Big Bang. So a lot of people find Atlantis to be a huge calling point for ancient societies. And everyone's like, oh, Atlantis is in, the Caribbean, or Atlantis is in the middle of the Atlantic. But to be honest, Atlantis is found. It's been pretty well documented. It's just not out for public consumption because it would start to raise more questions. So if you're looking at this image, you should be able to see Atlantis, but it's kind of hard. This is space. space image, obviously, so we're pretty far out. We're going to zoom in a little bit to take a little better picture. Now we're over the west coast of Africa in Mauritania. And as you can see, there's some weird stuff. You can still see these dragging lines, and it looks like, I guess you could say flood or something. But right in the middle of this, you see that circular structure, and this is called the Rakat structure. This is one of the only things that you can see naturally made from space of the entire Earth. We're going to zoom in a little bit better. This is a little bit more HD, so you can see these lines dragging out into the ocean. This is it gets pretty trippy.
I haven't seen that because I remember you talking to me about this, but I haven't seen that. That's a real image?
Yeah, this is a real satellite image. There's nothing altered about this. Not even, I don't think.
Low Earth orbit image.
Yes.
Low Earth orbit, yeah.
This is it's pretty. You get to some pretty crazy stuff with low.
Well, that even looks like there's a UFO crash right there.
And so you can see these lines dragging out to the ocean, but you can see the structure right in the middle. So the Rakat structure is a little bit interesting because Plato had a theory about this, and he said how you could find it. It said there's an opening to the south, there's mountainous region to the north, and that there's 3 layers of, I think it's 3 to 4 layers of rings that would engulf it. So if you're looking at this, you can see to the south, there is an opening that would have opened up into the ocean.
Yep, delta.
Yep, and then to the north, you have this pushed up region, which is mountains. And then starting from the center, you have your plateau, and then you have a little valley, which is a darker region, and then you have another region that's obviously
Built
higher.
back up.
It's like elevated.
Yep.
Yeah, like rings. Yeah.
Exactly, it's rings. And this is the image that most people would associate with Atlantis. It was an island in the middle of nothing, but we're going to go back 1 second so you can see this. Back in the day, as you can see, Mauritania is going to be over here on the west coast, and you could see the Rakat structure. It's very small, but if you take that Rakat structure up and you touch the ocean, you can see that there's actually a mountain range that follows that same line. Okay. So if you were to go back thousands of years when we had different levels of ocean, this would actually be the entrance of Africa, which would make sense of it being an island and then something happening and it pulling out all that water and making it part of the continent. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go back here. And this is an actual, I guess you could say, a hot air balloon kind of vantage.
Amazing looking.
Mm-hmm.
And it just shows you the magnitude of how big this thing is. This is not something that is you can walk over. This is, I would say it's something close to New York City. It's that big.
You could probably be walking through that site and you would never know that you're...
Exactly. If you were walking through this, you wouldn't know that you're in the Rakat structure. And there's also one more thing that, remember, this is pattern. So as we go on, you're going to start seeing that this all connects in a very weird way. So in the middle of the Rakat structure, to the north, there is another circular object. And it's almost perfectly circle right in there. And we will get to this soon, but I wanted you guys to see this because it's pretty odd to have a perfect circle inside of a perfect circle. That's not...
It's not natural. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. There's something going on. So this is just showing again the different lines that people didn't believe that there could be a big enough tsunami that could come across all of Africa and take away the vegetation of all of North Africa. But I mean, it seems pretty clear. There's some lines that indicate water movement and erosion in a very, and not over like millennia or thousands of years or something. This was something that happened in a matter of maybe moments. So this is not Africa. This is just a typical area that was inundated with water. And then you can see how the flood pulls back into the ocean. So you get these crazy lines, which, I mean, like, it's just like science. If you can recreate these things, you have to start connecting some of these dots because that's what the scientists tell you to do. So we can go back and we can see these lines are pretty, I mean, if it wasn't a water event, exactly. This was something on most people would say a biblical proportion. This was something that changed the world very quick. What most people don't understand is that this information has been known by the government for a very long time. This is called the Adam and Eve story. This was by Chan Thomas, I believe. He was hired by the government to study our crust and our mantle. What he found out about halfway through this thing was that there was an event that happened a long time ago that actually disconnected our crust from our mantle, and an event happened. This was funded by the government, and then once they started getting word of this, this was classified by the government. This was not re-released up until sometime in early 2018 or late 2017, I believe. But this is you can look it up. It's the Adam and Eve story. It's a very fitting title. Obviously, you can see the government knows how to play with these words and play these games. A lot of people do believe it was just a crust displacement, but if you were to read into this, I've started to, but it's very deep in, you have to kind of know this terminology to understand it, and I'm not.
It's a hard read.
Yeah, I'm not.
Wait, so you're saying that the government did
The government
experiment to detach the crust of the plant?
No, so the government paid Chan Thomas to do informational research like they do with like USGS about the core, the mantle, the crust, and all this stuff. And as he was getting deeper in his research, he found out that there was an incident at some point that the government was not aware of.
Okay.
And
they have that information.
And then, yes, and so they took it upon themselves, since they funded this situation, to classify it. So there are people who believe that this was just a crust displacement, but there is evidence, and this is just from my point, like I can see this, that there did seem to be some evidence of the mantle actually being displaced too. And to think about the crust of the entire earth moving is one thing, but to think about the crust moving one way and then the mantle moving a different way, it starts to get into some almost no level of survival. This is just movement this is movement on a different level.
Crazy town.
This is crazy town. So what people started to gather from this is that this was something big. This was not something that we could recreate with just a normal impact. This was not just a rock falling out of the sky, because one, the debris fields would be bigger. There would be a lot of evidence that would kind of pull this away, and it would make it a lot more clear cut. So there's been this field of plasma, and this plasma is one of the, I guess you could say, the elements that is most unknown to man when it comes to energy, when it comes to, a lot of things pertaining to plasma, even though we have plasma in our blood. It's something that we should know a lot more about, but it's one of the elements that's pretty unknown to us. So a quick overview of a plasma impact is, plasma is, how they describe it to us from the sun is that the plasma is just the aurora, but the plasma can carry debris with it, and that's what the science doesn't like to tell you about. So all this rock material that's between us and the sun, when we get a CME or a flare, we're not just getting the energy of that flare now. With these plasma events, we're actually getting the impact momentum of the flare, but we're getting all the debris that comes from being in between that. And so this is just showing a quick, like a simple one. You see the plasma coming in, it hits. When it hits, and you see these different, you see the red, the blue, and the negatives. These are just different materials also as charges. So when it hits, these elements are dispersed very unevenly, but very erratically. And as we go on, you're going to see some of this craziness. So this is 100% an experimental in-lab thing. So what you're having is, you see the rod from the top. This is done by a professor named Professor Pratt out of the, pardon me, I might miss this, but it's a New Mexico Institute of Plasma. And what they do is they do experiments to try to recreate certain events with plasma and experiment with plasma as a different source of energy. So what they're doing is they're conducting electricity through the top of the metal rod down into that's just mud. So that's just mud. And what you're seeing is that it's creating a crater. And I mean, for most people to see that, and this is just energy. So essentially, this is just lightning coming out of a rod that is creating this. And most people, what they've been told their whole life is that impact craters happen from large chunks of rock falling from the sky, and that backs up what most people believe in with gravity. And this is where it starts to get weird, is because now we're not just talking about something falling from the sky, a situation with our sun. Now we're talking about there's problems with how these guys are presenting gravity to us if we're creating impact craters, not impact craters, if we're creating craters with energy that are bigger than impact craters. It changes the whole dynamics of what our solar system is based upon, what we're actually based upon on this earth. And it gets pretty weird. So we're going to study, remember, patterns. So we have the discharge into the center of the circle, but you see the label, the mound. So the mound is just the resistance. So it kind of builds up. And then what you're going to notice in the middle of the crater too is there's some very interesting circular objects. Yep. So we're just going to keep going, because remember, patterns. I'm not a big person of like, look, this one instance is where I'm going to change your guys' mind.
Right.
I'm actually, I truthfully don't want to change your guys' minds. My intention from this is to show you what's out there, because for one to understand a lot of this stuff, you have to kind of associate it to the things that you know the most so it can connect. Because this is, once we get to the end, you'll see that this is not just about an event on Earth. This is about, it's about the study of man. And that's what anthropology is. It's the study of humans, but this is on the level of, I call truth. This is truth science, and truth science is a very dangerous thing. You could ask people who are dealing with holistic routes to cure cancer. You could ask people who are trying to get off the nuclear system. When you talk about truth science, it scares people, because it cuts people out of the field that they've built their entire life and reputation on. And this is exactly the situation that I was with my previous university, where it just didn't mesh. They wanted me to believe something, but I just can't believe something based upon he say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think climate science in general is that way.
Yeah,
People
absolutely.
have invested so much in humans being the cause that they cannot see any other alternative, because that's what they're being paid to see.
Exactly. And one of the biggest things with, this is, for me, you'll see this is not a conspiracy, this is just truth, but with a conspiracy talk is the easiest way for most people to understand these things is to follow the money.
Mm-hmm.
So if the money just gets so big that you can't break the bank, then you have to understand that you're dealing with something that it almost can't be broken. It's like trying to take down a government. Like, it would take a revolution. It takes something drastic or kind of finite. Like, it has to be the end. So this might not come out until the event is happening, because it would kill everything. To imagine saying, hey, gravity really isn't the main proprietor of what's keeping us on this earth. A lot of people are not going to want to go to work tomorrow. It's going to change a lot of things. So again, back to the image, we have another conductor coming down, and as you can see in this one, a little bit better, it's just shooting out energy. So that's just electricity, but it has made this crater. And this crater is very interesting, because as you can see up and to the left a little bit, these little holes that are freckling the atmosphere. And when I first saw that, the first thing I thought of was like, man, that looks a lot like the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see soon that, like everyone knows, the moon has no atmosphere, and the moon is very right out there into the sun's gaze. So this will get pretty interesting.
Well, like I know through my research, they say the craters are too shallow to be actual impact craters.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And then I do have some impact or some craters too. Then you'll see that they're shallow, and there's this phenomenon that happens called chain craters, and you'll see that even just if you stop to think about it, a chain crater. So these are craters that are lining up with each other. You would expect, and we haven't even talked about it, you would expect chain craters to have some residue impact. Like if they're right next to each other, there's going to be some dust from one into the other. It's not going to be perfect, and they're not going to look perfect. But we can get into what this plasma event actually looks like so you guys can see it before we kind of start to go a little bit further, because it's...
If I was to see that, or somebody was to see that, they would think angel.
Yeah.
Like an angel or a demon or a dragon, that's what a primitive person or a religious person might say.
Exactly. And it has the same, I mean, this looks like a CGI, this kind of looks like Avatar, like a fairy, like a pixie or something dancing through the forest. And this is a video. I don't know if we can play this.
Yeah.
So it's pretty quick. This is just discharging, and you can see it jumps around. It's almost like this has a life, and you've heard that about ball lightning too. It moves around as if it has its own consciousness, and it gets weird.
Yeah, that's crazy because have you heard of the higher side chats?
Yep.
With Greg Carlson. So I was listening to one today, and he's kind of talking about how the sun's it's not just a big fireball, and it's mostly plasma. And then the guy he had on was saying that it might even have its own consciousness. Like it's not just random events. Like it's going through like either cycles or stuff like that.
And I mean, you just hit it right on the head when you said cycles. I guess that could be a better title for this is world cycles is probably the best thing, because this is not something that happened just once. Like, we're not looking at this as ancient societies one time, and this is where
it's not an accident.
Exactly. And this is where I can get a little funky with you guys real quick. If this is cycles, and we're talking about ancient societies, and we're talking about electric universe, and we're going to get into some other stuff soon, we actually might be a little bit closer to understanding a simulation theory.
Mm-hmm.
With the current cycles that are happening and us only being able to go back one cycle to understand things. It's almost kind of like a hard reset. And with...
Like the Matrix when
Exactly. And as you can see, as we keep going further, you're going to see these electric principles are not just based in the heavens. This stuff is not only reflective upon us, but it's reflective upon what we walk on. It's crazy. Keep going. So again, on the right side, we have this experiment that they're trying to do, and on the left side, we have the moon. So on the right side, you're seeing again, you have the initial crater created by the energy, but you have those balls, and they're almost perfect. They're discharges from the impact of energy, but they stay pretty close within the crater. And then, as you can see on the right side, the left side looks, I mean, if you just let the right side cool, you're looking at the left side almost. Mm-hmm. And so what you're going to see on the left side is, like I say, it's patterns.
Right. So to simplify it a little bit, like the circle is the exact same all the way around, to where if like an asteroid hit, say it hit and then another big piece broke off inside the same crater,
or
it hit at an angle, there would be different depths and it would look different.
Exactly. And for this image to happen on the moon, either this all happened at one time and then for some reason they all landed in a perfect circle, or it happened while the moon still had an atmosphere and then it smoothed everything out.
Right, because there's no wind or anything to smooth it.
Exactly. So, but when you start looking at the timeline of how that would have to go into play and stuff, we're just looking at things that it just doesn't add up. Like you can't give the moon an atmosphere as long as you need it to make your crater theory possible, just to take it away. So what you're going to see on the moon, again with these patterns, is with the big craters, you'll always see smaller craters right on the edge. You'll see one in the middle, and you'll always see it on the edge. And it's just because when you have energy, as you saw in the last video, it jumps. It just doesn't stay in the one spot. It jumps, but then it focuses. And that's why you see with that, the one right in the middle is the best example. You see where it hit, and then to the left, it discharged a little bit, and then it jumps, and then you can just see how it moves around until the energy's gone. and then we're done. So we're going to keep going. This might get a little repetitive, but you guys are going to see this. Now, this is an experiment, but this is with straight metal. And I like this one because it allows you to show the depth of how this is not just mud. This happens to everything. So again, on example A, you have they call them blueberries, and we'll get to that later. They call these things blueberries, and you can see it's discharged like right outside of the circle. But if you go to the B version, you can see, and with example A, it was turned up a little bit, so it was a little bit deeper. You can kind of see the depth a little bit. B was trying to recreate as much as it can a moon impact without distorting it too much. And so you can see how the plasma is readjusting inside the circle and making circles inside the circle again. So it's repeating, and I'm kind of showing you guys this repeat because I don't want to show you one picture and then you go home and be like, hey guys, like I saw one thing and I'm going to base my whole life on this. Like, I believe that like the big picture is the best picture, but to see the big picture, you have to see all the pictures. So remember I talked about blueberries? Mm-hmm. This is Mars. So the highlighted thing in the very middle, it's a little hard to see. That's a little impact site, but most people know Mars is it's a hard planet. There's not a lot of give to any of those rocks. So it didn't make that big of an impact, but what it did was it displaced all that energy into all these, they call them blueberries, and all these blueberries formed around this one place. And we can go back and you can see when this event happens to very hard material, you get the discharge, you get what they call them blueberries. And we'll get to that later because there's some coverage to it. So what you have left is the silver pit crater. What you have right is marked just like it. It's a discharge crater, and what you're seeing is the same patterns again and again. You see the circle trying to displace itself, and then at the crater, you see the circle at the very edge. And usually what you'll see is when you can find the smaller circle, the opposite side, you're going to get that resistance. So on the crater edge, you get the resistance. I mean, this, like I say, it's science. It's just going to happen. So when you see it on the left-hand side, you see the resistance onto the left-hand side also. The silver pit crater.
So what is the silver pit crater?
The silver pit crater, I believe, is the biggest crater on the moon. So I'm not sure about the exact part of the silver pit crater, but I just know that they talk about the silver pit crater because of the material that it's made of is so representative of alloys that we have on Earth. I'm going to go to the next one. So here we go with the chain craters. So as you can see right in the middle of the picture, you see these chain craters that are happening. And for that to happen, you would have to have at least, what are we talking about, 25 maybe?
That totally looks like something created by an electrical arc.
Yeah, you would have to drop 25 objects right in line.
Right in line, yeah.
At certain velocities so that they don't interrupt the other. I think this is a perfect example. So you see the chain crater in the middle right. Impact craters do happen. You could just tell the difference. So if you look to the right, you can see this crater, and you can see how it kind of jumps out versus all these ones that are down the middle who are just, it's like they're trying to find a home. And then if you keep going north, you see the big one. And the big one has the same properties that we've been talking about before. You have the middle, you have the little discharge a little bit to the north of the big one. And then to the bottom left, you have the crater at the edge of the crater. It's just repeating itself.
You know, it's funny. You see these, when you're growing up and stuff, you see these pictures and everything. Talking to this one? Yeah. You see these pictures and everything, and you go, I'm getting hit in the face with the mic.
You're not on camera, though. You're good.
But you don't, until I heard you begin to explain this stuff, I just looked at that like, oh, that's the surface of the moon. That must be what it looks like. And then you get another explanation, and you go, obviously, like I've been a welder before, and used a cutting torch and stuff like that. And you unmistakably, that is not an impact crater.
Yeah, and
Couldn't be.
when you get different perspectives, I think that's like, to be honest, that's for me the key of life is perspective, because everyone can see the same thing, but if you just talk to somebody else who comes from a different walk, it gives you a different opportunity just to step back. And if you're told from a little kid, hey, rocks fall from the sky and they make these craters, it makes sense because you drop stuff in the sand all the time and you pick it up and there's a hole. So you don't go into the dynamics of like, hey, well, I dropped this and I saw some of the sand go to the right, so this, it's just not like that. We're, sad to say, we're programmed to believe certain aspects of what can't be wronged. And up until now, this has been, behind the quote unquote paywall. So it's easy for them just to go, no, you're seeing stuff. This is just how it happens. Again, it's just hard. Yeah, exactly. It gets to a point, and that's where I try to bring people, where it's just like, I'm not, this is you now. This isn't even me. Now that you know the science, now it's just easy to look at stuff and you can see it. And so if, again, patterns, the very top one, if you go to the top right, you see the circle that's displaced. The very bottom left crater has it to the north, and then the very top one again has, they're always at the same place. It's not like this random stuff. This isn't scientists making a phenomenon explanation of, yeah, sometimes this happens, but sometimes it doesn't. It happens every time. Keep going. Obviously, it just can't happen. But the more interesting thing about this is understanding how our universe works. So most things happen in a hard line, or there's a pattern, right? So if we can follow this a little bit, you can see it starts up and it swirls. You see that curve? Mm-hmm. That's pretty weird to see something curve like that in nature. And we're going to follow it. And what does it do again? It curves back. And most people can do this. You take your finger, you do it upside, or you just make like a mustache kind of sign, and then you do the opposite. So you have up and down. What you're starting to look at is the same principles that control a galaxy. And it sounds crazy, but if you just look at this flow, this arc, it flows.
Like DNA.
I think Robbie's onto something, guys. So we're going to keep going, and we're going to see this again, chain craters. And my reason for this is we're going to start getting to a point where things are going to start getting fast, where we can start looking at this and understanding what's really going on. So here we go. This is Charlie Duke, John Young on the moon.
Should be audio here now.
Yeah, I believe so. Oh, maybe there is no audio on this, but
faint something, but
yeah. So there is some text to say. So this was one of the Apollo missions. They get up there and they're saying, they're walking around and they keep mentioning glass. They're finding glass everywhere they're looking for. Like they're just looking, and you can see they're marking it. These are just huge clusters of black glass, and then as I hope they show it with words, but they're gonna get into. Look at that right there. Beads all over the place. Remember those blueberries? Mm-hmm. So we're going to get into colored glass too. So they're finding all this stuff. And the biggest quote, I don't know if they're going to bring it up, so I want to say it, is he says, "We found a prism on the moon. It looks like Pink Floyd reached us first," or something along the lines of Pink Floyd, the prism, and the moon. And this is not something this was not something that was, I guess they expected it, because the last thing that they say is them talking back and forth about, hey, we found it. So these guys went to the moon with the purpose of finding something along these lines. This was not what we're looking for. This is not something that was just thrown up there and whatever. We're talking about zap hits. They knew what they were looking for because they wanted to be sure that they were about to cover up the right thing, So this is a piece of what they brought back, and as you can see, the entire surface of one of these rocks is just scarred. It looks like if you could, I mean, we can't do anything like that on Earth. This is, I mean, maybe with a welding torch, but these are just huge scars, and this is what they were finding all over the moon. I mean, covered. And what
You know what it reminds me of is a I guess it's a TIG welder. I always got confused MIG welder and TIG welder. TIG welder is a aluminum welder though, and it uses an electrode like that, and you just direct the current on your target, and if you fuck up, that's what you get.
Well, I mean, yeah,
Like you get yeah.
It says zap hits right there, and then you can, if you really look at it, you can see it. And when you look at it, it kind of looks like a miniature version of what happens on the moon on this one rock. And that's what we're going to get into, you know, the macros. I don't want to get into it, but the one term that I'm going to start using as we get into the societies that you'll see is as above, so below. If you know the know, that is a Masonic term. It's how they kept stuff quiet, but allowing it to be public. You know, as above, so below. So like what Robbie was saying, it seems like this was electric. You know, we're getting into some crazy stuff. So this is a nebula, a far out thing. They're using not normal cameras to see this. And what they try to say is like, oh, this is just part of the galaxy. Well, that's weird because as you can see in the middle, that's how electric currents work. And so what you're seeing is a footprint behind us, because this was a satellite that was pointed behind us. You're seeing a footprint behind us of an electric current running through the universe. Now that's
pretty crazy, yeah.
It's a pretty crazy thought to think of an electric current running through the universe. That's, I mean, for me, I get real nerdy about some weird stuff. But when I came across this and seeing and knowing the ramifications of an electric current running through the universe, I mean, that's like buying a house and then finding a power plug going from your neighbor's through your house to another neighbor, and then you not being able to connect to it. You're going to ask a lot of questions of why this power is running through my house. So why is this electricity in the universe that's governed by gravity? You know, it's kind of weird. What's lightning doing in the middle of a vacuum? So we're going to get into some things that these societies might have known and might have been aware of through maybe experimentation, through catastrophes, or for whatever reason these people happen to know this. And they call this a Saturn polar configuration. And when this happens, there's some pretty cool things that happen with auroras. They become a little bit brighter. We tend to see a little bit more activity with our storms, quakes, rainstorms, pressures, that kind of stuff. And what it goes into is, as you can see, I'm going to go back real fast so you can just see these planets that are here. We have Earth, Mars, Saturn that are right in there, and you have Sun at the middle. And it's acting as the inductor. Like this is, we're talking about just straight electricity. Like this is just whatever. And you can see these formations that these ancient societies, the bottom right is Persia, the bottom left is Egypt, and so for Egypt you have Earth, Mars, Venus, Earth, Mars, Venus, and at the top you have, this is the big one. They call this the crown. This is where, if you know some Egyptian lore, they would wait for this time to actually crown the royalty of their family, and this would happen on these days. I call them energy days. Mm-hmm. So it was deeper than just, hey, we have a new leader. They knew about something that was going on in the sky, and they were trying to imitate, you know, as above, so below. Mm-hmm. Same thing. And so the crazy thing is, you'll see that these actually make these kind of symbols. In the bottom right, you see the Mithra. That's a old myth that they used to tell, but it's like they used to wear the elf hats, and you can see how Venus kind of bends down from the Mars plane and from us, so it kind of creates that little slope. And so if you're looking at it with energy passing through it, you're going to see this kind of looks like a little snake. Yep. And then when you're looking straight on too. So that's the view that essentially we would see from Earth.
This is a bird's eye view.
Yes.
Yeah, of this line.
And then the picture is just what the myth or what they were trying to represent here on Earth. So as you can see again, as above, so below. So we're going to get into this really quick. This is what most people line up as our solar system, and it gets pretty crazy. We can tell this story really quick of the I don't know how to say this. I guess it's like the Roman Greek archetype of how they believe this it's their god system, but what it comes down to is how this solar system was made. And what we can see is, I hate to kind of be blunt, and sorry for anyone who's watching this who is very religious or spiritual. I'm just talking science, and if you don't agree with that, I'm so sorry, but it's just what it comes down to. I feel like a lot of the religion and spirituality on this earth is trying to show us something grander. So I'm not saying it's wrong. I just believe that we are not seeing the bigger picture, not the other way around. So there is this story where Jupiter is known as Zeus in the Greek archetype, or I guess I believe it's Greek. I get Roman and Greek mixed up because for me they're essentially the same thing, just different names. So you have Jupiter, who's represented as Zeus. You have Saturn, who's represented as Kronos. And if you know Kronos is also time. And that's where we get the word crown from. And you know Saturn has the rings. That's also where we get the wedding band from, Kronos, time. You know, most ceremonies they talk about love is endless and timeless, and it'll go on forever. So it's just a representation of Saturn. Uranus was called the father of the skies. And so what happens was, let me see if I got this right. Jupiter as Zeus tries to take over Kronos, who's Saturn. Kronos, who's Saturn, took over power from Uranus, who is the father of the sky. So what we're seeing is, what most people believed is at one point this was a binary star system. So we have the sun and we have Saturn, which was the previous, and this is a real term, they call it the dark star. When we mingled with each other, there was an intervention of Jupiter coming between what was the old planets that used to follow Saturn. So when you have Venus, Earth, Mars, these used to follow Saturn. Jupiter was so when these two things combine, I don't know if you guys could see me. So these two things come in, there might be a graphic after this to kind of show a little bit better. As these two things come in, the planetary mix-up happened, and the morning star Venus was born. You know, this is a documented thing with religion. This is how it happened, and the Saturn became dark as the sun became the brightest image in our sky. And what most people would identify that is God saying, "Let there be light," because obviously going from Saturn to the sun is a huge jump in light, in the amount of luminosity happening in our solar system. So we're going to get into that. So that's just a little brief thing, because I want you to understand the whole Roman Greek aspect of some of this, because again, patterns you'll start to see this gets a little bit weird. This is the traditional model that's told to us and that we're kind of taught. So we'll go into this, and this is the above view. This is pretty normal. This is what we're taught. This is nothing crazy. But to be honest, it's pretty wrong. I mean, this is right if you're looking at it, if it's motionless. But here's the truth of what our solar system really looks like. Our sun is being shot into nothingness, and we're following it. So how we're explained, or how gravity is explained to us, has a different holding when you start to see different things. When you make this a big picture and you stop looking at it as just a solar system, you start to see that this is the same thing that's happening with these events. So this is the electric compression principles, and what you're seeing is a vortex. And this is just how electricity passes. It, if you compress it, it travels faster. It's just how it works. So it's pretty weird. So we're going to go into this vortex situation here, and again, this is going to be a little bit random, whatever, but we're going to get to these patterns.
Well, what you're showing people is just the likeness of what you find in nature.
Yes,
to
absolutely.
What you're talking about here.
And again, sorry, I kind of jump around because I kind of want people to kind of start to see the patterns, because my words are only my words. You know, to be honest, who am I to anybody else who knows this stuff like me? If we can all see the same patterns, my words start to become background noise for you seeing this stuff and understanding it. So we're getting, and this is actually pi. This is pi represented in a shell. But if you look at it, it could be vortex, and especially when you look at it that way. We're essentially looking at the same thing. So we're going to go into a satellite image that we sent out into space, and we turned behind us, because remember, we're being shot into nothingness, and we turned it behind us to see what we could see. We wanted to see the universe. And this is what we saw. You know, most people would think, oh, that's pretty crazy. But when you look at it in the view of looking back through a vortex or looking out through into the bigger aspect of the vortex, it makes perfect sense of what this universe is and why it's not a square or anything, because what we're traveling through is really just a big vortex. And when you look at it this way, you can see how the Big Bang actually works with what they're saying, but they just don't describe the right principles. They say the Big Bang was a compression, gravity took hold, and it scattered everything in an equal amount always. It did, to some extent, do that, but none of this had to do with gravity or whatever their components to their Big Bang are. As we can keep going, you're going to see this is an event, just like what happens with the sun, just like it happens on Earth. This is just a way bigger one, so we're not feeling the ramifications of it. So we're going to get into I guess this is like the payoff. This is where it starts to get a little juicy, guys.
All right. I mean, this whole thing is.
Yeah, we have to set it up for the payoff. So here we go. This is what some people would call squatting man. Now, this is known through anthropology because this is the one image that people have not been able to figure out of why it appears throughout the entire world. This is not something that is strictly on the North American continent. This is worldwide that this image is seen. But what you're actually seeing is a plasma discharge that Professor Pratt simulated in his laboratory. So what you're seeing is a plasma discharge, and we're going to kind of start stepping through. So now we're going to get into the ancient societies, and that the fact that they all witnessed and experienced one event that they all shared that really is unprecedented. Again, I can keep trying to say it, but it just gets a little bit weird. So this is what they would have seen from the sky. This is what the sun would have discharged and would have left in the sky for the people to see. And you can see it's a little bit different because now it's not in motion. It's not carrying the current charge, but you still see a few things that we're going to start pointing out. So most people are going to see it, and if you were to see this in the sky as a human being, you would try to make this out. You would try to personify it. You would try to put human characteristics towards it. So most people initially see, because a lot of people are religious, they see a figure with his hands raised. You could also see, when my first instinct when I saw it was these two circles that are in the middle, and then you see the down, like the sad face.
Like a face.
Yeah, and that's what I saw. So imagine seeing this after, as you know, there's a catastrophe going on. It would kind of seem like the face of God, and he seems kind of angry, doesn't it? So it gets pretty weird. Again, this is just recreations of what these people would have seen in real time. And this is why it gets weird, because that dome that's under I call it the squatting man, what's under the man's legs, that's not pretty. That's completely gone. Like that is an impact zone. So there's your crater. And, so from afar, it looks pretty, it looks cool, it looks unworldly, but it's causing great devastation. Like it's killing everything.
So if you're there, you're fried.
Yeah, well, from here you would be able to see it.
I'm saying if you're under
exactly
if you're being squatted on.
If you're being squatted on, it's not good. So we're going to keep going. I like this one because there's as you can see, they kind of incorporated these drawings that these people would have seen too on the bottom right. And that's essentially is what's left over. So what we're going to start picking out from this image is these patterns. So obviously you have the squatting man at the bottom. You have this halo that's above them, but if you could see at the very top, it's cut off. So that's where we get the bullhorn, the strength of power from the bull and the symbolization that it comes from it, or the crescent moon. This is all this one image. And then internal inside the circle, you see this, I don't know if they're trying to represent the sun or Venus in the middle of it, but you have these spokes. You have the wheel of life, some people like to call it. You have, if you take the X out of it, you have what most people would call the Holy Cross. You have a bunch of different things, but also with this, you can count the spokes. You have 8 spokes with the 8th one going down. So if you don't include the 8th one going down, which is the connector, you have 7 spokes. 7 deadly sins. There's 7 keys.
7-pointed star, yeah.
Exactly. We're going to start to get into some pretty crazy stuff with relations. So again, I'm trying to bring you back and forth. This is Pratt recreating a plasma discharge. So he's holding plasma above, and you can see where it gets dark is he's holding it into a vacuum. So where this gets weird is that's plasma forming by itself into that image. So
it naturally does that.
It naturally does that. So when we start talking about creation and stuff, this makes a lot more sense of how we got from where we did to where we are versus gravity holding us down and trying to pull us down, whatever. And this is something that's even above me. I don't know, but it just makes more sense that plasma, the fundamentals of plasma, show what seems to be a human figure by itself. This was uninterrupted. This is how it's just made. This is just nature. But gravity seems to want to hold us down. So it just seems to be another weird thing about gravity, where it just doesn't make sense, where if we're in the womb and we're floating around and we don't really experience too much gravity in there, plasma just seems to explain a lot more of natural occurrences than gravity and all its different things. So we'll keep going. Again, what you have on the bottom left is just lightning in nature, but what you have above it and to the top right and to the bottom left is actually the same thing. It's being suspended and into a vacuum. And the only difference that you could really tell from the lightning and to the plasma discharge is number 5. There's no thermal activity or radiation being passed through the plasma. But besides that, you have a recreation of lightning from a conductor into nothingness. So we're starting to see that this is repeating. This happens naturally. We're going to get into some other things that just happen naturally. So you see the pixies. That color is what we saw earlier, kind of. They call this ball lightning. I've
heard of ball.
Yeah, there's some crazy videos. There's one video on YouTube. They're on a plane, and a ball of lightning travels down the middle of the aisle. I mean, it's pretty crazy to be on a plane for a ball of lightning to appear in the middle of your flight, travel down the aisle, and then disappear. That's most people would.
That shit was real?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that video. It's pretty, yeah.
And most people back in the day would just say, yeah, it's a ghost or that's a djinn. Exactly. This is where it starts to get into the mythology of everything that's created. So you have these red sprites, and so you have the elf. That's just really what I like to call what's the thing that goes above Alaska? The aurora. Yeah. Aurora borealis. That's just a different version of it. But the red sprites are what really interests me. And again, we're going back to this whole Greek-Roman thing. This is an actual picture taken in Prague. There's a lightning storm going on. Pause for a second, and the pressure from the whole lightning storm caused this. This is a discharge too, and they captured it. And so we're starting to get into some weird structural things. Again, a discharge, but above the clouds. And if you know the stories of the gods they house themselves in the clouds, above the clouds in the heavens. So to see that image in in the clouds, we can start to see like the Greeks and Romans, they probably didn't really believe that Zeus was in the clouds. They were just trying to represent the information that they had to be passed on past one generation, especially after dealing with what had happened, to live within maybe 100 or 200, 300 years of an event that essentially wiped out the entire world. Those things aren't forgotten pretty easily. We're pretty far removed from it now, and that's why it kind of allows us to be a little bit more humble with our situation. We don't worry about those things as much because it has no effect on us. For us, a bad year is a 100-year flood. We're talking about something that happens maybe at once
for 100 years.
These events maybe happen hundreds of thousands, 50,000 years apart. It's just, we can't comprehend it. It's for a human, even for human structures, it's just, the Grand Canyon probably wasn't around the last time this happened. So to contemplate that, we have no real recollection, like we can't understand time. So again, the top is Pratt doing plasma discharges in his laboratory. On the bottom right, or on the bottom, we can see, especially from everyone who's from Arizona, you can know what 3 through 5 is. It looks like the Triton, the Sparty stick, Mm-hmm. And now you can start to see where some of these mythologies are getting their basis from. They're just seeing these events and they're trying to relate it to their stories. So like that's 100% suspended in zero gravity. It makes, it gets pretty crazy. So this is an artist's rendition of trying to show you, Zeus holding the lightning in his hand. So, mythology is true. Now, if I were to show you guys this, in the bottom right, what would your first instinct be? That's a picture of
the Milky Way, or a galaxy, spiral galaxy.
The yin and the yang?
Yeah. So a galaxy, the yin and the yang, a flow of some type. But to be honest, nope, this is just Pratt again in his laboratory recreating 2 plasma discharges right next to each other. So, the evidence starts to pile up that our universe is not being portrayed to us in the right sense. We're not being told the correct facts about what this universe is based upon, the rules, the fundamentals, and even the elements that are going on inside of this. So we're getting down the slippery slope. And now you can see there's a real picture of what they have out there versus the recreations that he's doing in a laboratory. This is one man. This is not a team of people. This is just one man doing this. Keep going a little bit further. And now we're going to start getting into the hieroglyphs or the pictographs or whatever the pictures that were left over on the rocks. So on the bottom, in the middle line, you're going to see a bunch of Central and South American rock art. On the very bottom, it's a mixture of, you'll see Siberian and Central and South American art. But it's pretty close to what we would say a nebula, a galaxy is. But as we can just go back, these are just plasma discharges. So as you can see, what they used to say in the past is that when a sun or a star would have an event like this, it would essentially be its death. It would explode, it would be done, it would turn itself into a black hole, and then it's done. But, you guys can see it very clear that, so all the red stuff is, like I said before, the momentum that picks up all the dust around it. So that stuff is traveling at us. At some point, that is going to hit Earth. It's just so far away, we'll never have to deal with it. But as you can see in the middle of both of those two, I guess you could call them situations, there's still those stars. Those stars didn't disappear. They didn't turn black. So what they did is they just shed their outside layer. And this is where it starts to get scary because people, really up until, who knows, people probably still teach this, that once the sun goes, it's done. It turns itself off, it novas, and it's done. It implodes, it's done, but we wouldn't never have to deal with that because where our sun is in its cycle. That it has nothing to do with that. Who knows how long suns go? We can't to try to understand that is, it's a backwards thing. It's an ant trying to count years. It can't. So what we're seeing with this is just, again, it's just the same thing. We're going to see another Pratt experimentation. These are just discharges. And what you're seeing, this is a little bit hard to see. It's a little small. Sorry, guys. You're seeing natural X's that are forming in these discharges. And if you put two discharges on top of each other, on the far left, you'll see it. You get these two eyes. I call them eyes. You get these two empty spots. Now what you're starting to see is, people call it the owl, the system, the all-seeing eyes. You start to see some weird stuff. So we're just going to keep on trekking through. I'm going to start picking up some speed again. So now we're seeing on the far left, this is an actual galaxy. They call it some
numbers and letters.
Yeah, but they say, hey, this is a galaxy and this is really happening. But I mean, as you can see, this is a theoretical by David LaPlante. In principle, that's what happens, and the experiment by Mr. Pratt is the same thing. So what we're talking about is events that NASA or whoever these space industry people are redefining as something else up until they have to actually I think it's up until they have to provide us the truth. Because to say that gravity plays such a small principle in space, it changes everything for history. It makes everything a lot different. So again, in the very middle, what you have is a picture that we sent a satellite to hover over a comet. I don't know if this is ISON. I think it is. It hovered over it, and it took a bunch of different pictures in different scopes to try to see what was going on. And what it shows is the hourglass. And when you get the hourglass, that's a pretty clear indication of plasma and a correlation of energy and a certain type of energy. And I mean, it seems pretty clear. On the left and the right, those are plasma experiments. So again, we're getting into this whole plasma energy thing. Again, we're going to get into squatting man. All these different pictures on the bottom are different areas of the world that this squatting man has popped up. We're going to get into some bigger ones so you don't have to stress your eyes about this.
I got a little zoomed in on the recording here a little bit.
And then just another one, just going to go through quick. I just want you guys to see that this is not just, this isn't just one cave in every continent. These things are littered. And
well, we see them here a lot in Arizona. I know my mom used to take me up to all the Indian ruins and stuff. This stuff would be everywhere.
Yeah, and what most people believe is that Arizona, northern Arizona being on the plateau that it was, avoided most of the catastrophe that happened in the last cycle.
So they were the ones witnessing it.
Yeah, and that's why you have stories of, the Hopi people, which if you look into the tribes of North America, the Hopi people are really the eldest tribe to maintain everything going on, and their stories line up with Babylonian stories. And that's where it gets weird when we're talking about, the time before what most people would say like Jesus Christ and stuff, and these stories lining up with tribes in North America. It shows that there's something going on a big level. It's just not a Middle East thing. This was not just a flood in the Middle East. That this was something that happened across the entire world.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it in our climate change, but the around 12,000 years ago, the temperature of the Earth spiked 1,000-fold, and you can see everyone's talking about climate change and it's getting hot or whatever. Everything's
he kind of showed that graph earlier.
Yeah, it was kind of the same graph, and you could tell. Yeah, we go through cycles. It's humans aren't probably the cause of climate change. It's just us going through cycles, and 12,000 years ago, that's when they said the flood happened, and a lot of people I listen to believe we are a lot more advanced before that point, and that wiped us out, which it totally could, right?
Yeah.
Freaking lightning storm from hell come raining down on us and stuff.
Everything gets washed into the bottom of the ocean.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so Also with this, you're going to see that like from China, Spain, New Mexico, we're talking Armenia, it's just happening everywhere. And you keep going. These are more experiments. I like to call these next couple slides the Jacob's Ladder slides, because they're going to be showing the same thing that I believe that the Jacob's Ladder story is trying to represent, or the Stairway to Heaven, these types of things. So on the left, you see Pratt's plasma experiments, and you can see how these are discharges. So these are instabilities that are going up and then essentially falling apart. And in the middle, you see these petroglyphs from around the world, and you can see they're essentially trying to show the same thing. They're showing circles and columns going up. And when you see these start to connect to the bigger thing, it gets pretty weird. Bottom again, experiments. Top right are the petroglyphs that are, these people were really documenting this event as it was happening. And it's, for a long time, I grew up thinking this, like, man, these guys were just drawing on caves. Like, they couldn't have been that advanced. But when you have everything taken away from you,
What else are you gonna
And
do?
you're trying to warn or something, but you don't know
Trying to
exactly what it
document.
is.
And then to think about the magnitude of the whole globe doing these things at the same time, I actually reversed my thought in like a second of being like, man, these guys were so primitive, they didn't have anything, to thinking these people as a whole, were way more informed than we are as a whole to think like, all right, this event's happening. We don't have anything to document this, but we don't want this to happen again. Where can we put this that's not going to be washed away? Yeah. So it's not just, you just didn't have the Hopi people being like, hey, we're smarter than everybody else, we're going to put it on the rocks. You had a central thought of, hey, we're kind of above, I would say a caveman. Like, we're not just going to run and hide in the cave. We have a plan of action, and it seemed to be a global plan of action, which makes me think even more that maybe there was hints of maybe like a global government way back in the day that kept everyone on a standard of knowledge. So when everything fell apart, it seems like everyone was on the same page. They just couldn't connect with everybody. And that's
where they kind of...
Yeah, and that's what kind of... I feel like we're at the same point where if the electric grid goes out right now, we all can't communicate, but we all have, on every continent, enough people to maybe throw up the warning signs in the same way at the same time, but it wouldn't be connected. So if people were to look back at it at the next cycle, they wouldn't be able to look and be like, hey, these guys had cell phones, they were talking, because the cell phones are going to be gone by that time. But they can be like, well, these people that were in Arizona were doing the same thing that the Armenian people were doing. So obviously it seems like there is a little bit more communication than just, hey, we're thinking and seeing the same thing. So I think that there might have been a little bit more of a correlation between, I think civilizations communicated a lot more than we give them credit for. And like you were saying, I think they're a lot more advanced. I think there's, in Egypt you see signs of batteries, and in Iran and stuff like that. So I think we're misinformed, to be honest, very misinformed.
Yeah, I've looked into something where it was cave drawings that were 25,000 years old, and they were bird's eye views of like cattle and horses and stuff like that.
It's where it just doesn't make sense to place these people as cavemen, but to give them certain aspects of kind of our modern reality of things. Like, how can you be a caveman but have a bird's eye perspective?
Right.
So we're going to keep going, some more plasma discharges. And see how I was saying earlier with the craters, it kind of is getting to the point where it's like, yeah, we get it. These things they're doing these things. So at the very top, you can see they call this the whistling man. So again, this is just dropped into a vacuum, and these formations come out, and you can see that they're recreated throughout. This is a lot of Southwest, but Africa. So, to connect the Southwest and Africa, that's a big stretch.
Right. And people might say like, all right, well, I can kind of see how it kind of looks like that. But if you've never seen something before and you need to like describe it to someone, you're going to pick the closest thing that you both can come to common ground and understand.
Yeah, it looked like a guy with a
Yeah,
with a stick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of personification that goes on with these rock arts. So again, we're going to get into the double eye. We see the owl. If you guys are Drake fans, you guys can see the OVO within that, you see the O, and then it kind of drops down right between where the nose is, and you see the V as it comes down in the O. So again, yes, secret societies do know about this stuff. They do kind of put it out there for people to understand if you do know, but it's just one of those things. I call this the mushroom head, and I want to do these little ones so you guys can see the big picture as we start to speed through these civilizations. So you have a discharge that Pratt proved, and it goes up, and then it kind of flares out towards the top, and I call it mushroom head. Again, this is in Arizona. Most people be like, oh, look, they're trying to draw a flower. Nope. They're trying to show this plasma discharge. Again, in the middle, this is a 3D representation of what it would have been like to see the initial...
From underneath, huh?
Yeah, and this is... If you're seeing this, you're not smiling, because you're pretty close to this. You're pretty close into that squatting area.
It kind of explains why they're so obsessed with the skies, too.
Exactly.
And lining everything up to it, like...
And again, so we're just seeing different representations of how these people are trying to show this thing. We're going to get into...
a lot of these are in the NASCAR lines, too.
Yep. So this actually... do we have this one? This is my favorite... This is my favorite petroglyph because for me it shows everything. There's not anything that misses in this one thing. You get everything from ancient societies to modern societies. So what you got is obvious. I mean, not obvious. This is kind of a weird one, but I noticed it right away. If you see that left hand, it's pointed exactly down and it exactly stretched out. The upside down, the pentagon upside down, most people would associate that in esoteric terms with the Lucifer's head, the goat head. Mm-hmm. So you have that. If you look up, you have what? I mean, when I saw this, I was like, wait, this is in Siberia. There was no Hebrew people in Siberia because this looks like...
Exactly what it is. When you first put it up,
I was like
everyone sees them in
Yeah. But I'm thinking this is in Siberia. This doesn't make any sense. And if you look just to the left, those words or those letters, they look a lot like Hebrew too. So then we're going to go to the right. We have this stalk. They call it the tree of life, but those are just, it's that line of discharges. And then there's going to be a different, So, and then we have the circle with the cross in it. And we saw that other one where if you take the X out of it, you have the cross. So it's just different phases of this one event happening. Mm-hmm. So this gets into some pretty crazy things because over here, that's India on the far left, and I think that's Monaco. I believe it's, but essentially these are different places. But on the left, you have India, and you can see that's the first representation of what most people were going to consider Medusa.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you understand Medusa and her whole thing was to scare men away from a sacred area. And when you look at it,
she was a feminist.
And when you look at it like this, even the line that would connect it is represented in her tongue.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it gets into like I say, like these stories are really cool stories and stuff.
And if you looked at her, you turned to stone.
You would die.
That could throw you. They could.
So these stories,
these
stories are here to warn people about what's really going on, but by excluding, it's how secret societies work. They're going to give you the truth without giving you all of the knowledge of the truth, so you don't understand it. So this is the face. This is a Siberian face.
It's amazing looking.
Again, you have the circles. You have the V if you follow it in. So you're looking at the owl face, really. It's just a stylistic version of it. This is in Siberia, so we're going to get into some weirdness because these do coincide with ones that are in South America. Again, so this is a little bit faint, but in the middle, you can see the two circles. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to show you that same weird face that was staring at them, God's face in the sky. This is Siberia still. So now we're going to get through. So we're going to go through these kind of fast, but I'm trying to show you these are different locations. So now we're in Spain. So you see the squatting man in Spain. You have the sun in the very bottom. You have the sun, the crown, the Kronos crown, the corona over him. But you have the squatting man again. This is Spain. This is Spain again. I call this one triangle face because you're going to see again these certain patterns reoccur. So you have a stylized version of squatting man.
Yeah, no one would
What
make
is
if
that?
someone was making this pottery or whatever it
Is that
is.
pottery? Is that clay or something, or is that a rock?
Yeah, so this is the actual one, and the one on the left is the replica. So it's a little bit like more vivid.
Yeah, no one would draw a human like that if that's what they were going for. You know?
That's pottery.
Yeah, on the left it's a pottery, and this is from Spain.
Oh, right, yeah.
So this is, we're in Siberia and Spain. They're close, but they're really not that close. So we're getting into some weird stuff. Now we're going into ancient Babylon. This is a religion called Zoroism, and if you don't know where it ties to Zorro, there's some weird ties into all this stuff. But I like to call it this, like in the squatting man. So I refer to this again as above, so below. So you're going to see these legs, they drop down. So you have the down, and it is missing the up ones. But this is a very stylized version of it. This is more for the entrance of a temple. They're trying to make this look cute. But as you can see, he's in the middle of a circle, and he's holding the circle. And if you remember the squatting man, it had the circles on the sides.
And the moon craters.
Yep.
Yeah. And you could kind of see the lines in the middle too as the other ones. Yeah.
So then we're going to keep going on this next one. And see, now we're getting into, so this last one was, they touched this up. Obviously, this is not the original one from back in the day, but this is an original from ancient Babylon. And as you can see, now they have everything there. They have the as above, so below. So that's what I call it. It's just the wings up and the wings down. So you get the full squatting man, the raising his hands and squatting down. You have the belt across the middle, which is represented as it moves, but when it stops, it just sits as a filament. So this is ancient Babylon. This is pretty far back. We're starting to see some weird stuff. Remember how I was talking about the 7-pointed star? So if we take away that middle structure with the holds it up, we're talking about the same thing again. This is ancient Babylon. So again, ancient Babylon. And if you want to count those things around that middle, I guarantee you're going to get that same number.
Yeah, so that's a really famous, not this exact one, but when they're picking the olive tree or whatever they want to say, or planting the knowledge.
Yep.
Yeah, they don't really ever mention that it could be plasma. It's always, referred to ancient aliens and stuff like that.
You notice a lot of sheriff's departments use the 7-pointed star too.
Yep. Because,
it's authority, or what do you think? It's like a symbol of.
Well, they probably don't even. Probably came from a long time ago. It probably was handed.
I believe that to be a certain level of a police officer, you have to be part of a fraternal order, and this fraternal order stems from the York Rite, which is third level masonry. So I think that all high-level police...
It's got to be high, because the guy I went to high school with a cop now, and there's no way he's at the high level.
No.
There's no way.
Yeah, I have a few police high school people, too, and I'm just like,
you're not getting the good stuff.
Yeah, no, but I do believe that, and it's behind the paywall, like you said, like they know, because they wear these things, and the higher level people, they know about it, and that's why they wear it. But not everybody knows about it, so they don't have to tell everyone. And again, so this one seems a little bit less stylized, but you're getting the same thing. Sorry about that. So if you look at their arms are going up, so you're getting the as above, so below. And if you do, so we can start making shapes with this thing. What they're trying to enclose this in is a diamond or a hexagon, as you can see. Yeah. And ancient we got starting to get into ancient geometry, and now it's going to start getting into some weird stuff. So now we're talking about the Celts, or the Celtic traditions. I guess some people like to refer to this as the pagan tradition. This is also we were just talking about it, perfect timing. This also stems into the masonry, the rites. This would not apply to the York Rite. This is still going to be a little bit Scottish Rite stuff, but you're seeing these images, and like before, you're seeing the crescent moon, like the horn of the bull, like we saw that one picture that cut out. Remember, Venus was in the middle of all that. You have the cross, and then you have this weird M. We'll get into that later, but if we want to talk about this fire stuff now. So this bottom thing is weird because you're going to see this pop up in only a few images, but these images that it does pop up are very powerful because they're more relatable to what today is. So when all this was sitting, you'll see in the other pictures that at the bottom of all this where they say fire is represented, a lot of the time it's represented by Saturn, or it's represented by, we'll see later, Lucifer crossing his knees. And you'll see, if you know it, like time, 8 is eternity. So what they're trying to show you is that this is a cycle. This is going to continue to happen. But even more importantly than that, the things that are above it are what truly controls it. And we have no control over it. So when you see, and that's why I am a religious person, and I don't like to say this, the pagan thought philosophy is very informative because they're not trying to sugarcoat anything to you. They're just going to give you the hard facts, and that's why a lot of people don't like it, because a lot of people, once you have the facts, you don't have to follow the doctrine. You can just do your own thing, apply it, and that's what it is. It's free will. That's why there's free Masons. There are Masons in this world who are still they're forced to the law that is given to them. Freemasons build and destroy based upon the laws that they see fit and that they see are right. So in a Mason society, they try to do what is... Masons are like Hebrews, and they try to do what's best for the world. Freemasons do what's best for them, which a lot of the times it can be for the world, but it's a little bit more selfish. And you can see this. So we're gonna start going into some. So this is Buddhist. You see the wheels again, and get into the weirdness of that. Obviously it's this. We're talking about the same thing. This looks a lot like a Mason picture, right? Like when you see the stuff open up, and it's the same thing. These guys are just trying to show you the same thing. Now we're getting to the Muslim religion. Let's change that 5-pointed star, even though we've seen like the 5 hands upside down. Let's just change that 5-pointed star to a regular dot. Now you just have a crescent moon in a dot. We're really talking about the same thing. Because it's a star, it's just there's no 5-pointed stars. We're not kids. So we have this. This is also part of the Muslim tradition. It's the all-seeing eye, the right hand of God. You can see on the very top left, that is actually one of the images that they believe happened in this last cycle.
Gotcha. So these hand things are coming from...
It's a discharge pattern. Mm-hmm. And again, and this is why it gets a macro-micro situation where we suspended that plasma in the thing, and we got the stick figure, right? So we got the human shape. And now you can suspend it in a certain way, and you can also get the hand. And the hand is what's supposed to, set us apart from so many different things in this world. So you get the hand that's different, that's created naturally. You get the human body that's created naturally. We started to get into weird. For me, it's weird that you can naturally put an element into nothingness, and you get the shape that we are,
Our figure,
familiar with.
Yes.
So familiar, yeah.
And we're so rare on this planet. It's not like there's...
Representative of,
Again, as above, so below. It starts to get into some... It sounds weird, but it starts to get into some spiritual stuff of what's really going on in this thing. So now we're getting to the Hebrew. And as you can see, it's just as stylized. You can see the 2 suns. There's your 2 circles. As above, as you can see, the doves or the birds are pointing up. And then so below, you got the legs pointing down. They're just telling the same story, just stylized. This is a Hebrew poem that was found in the Middle East.
Right, like why would they, if you go back for a second, why would they angle the what are these, dogs or something? I don't know. Panthers?
Yeah.
That's
with people
interesting
peeking out. Yeah, like why would they, with the birds on top and a vase and vase, whatever, and like...
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that, the middle, the vase, the vase, because when you hear about biblical times, it says that in they will spill out, the the cup of filth will be full and it'll spill over, and that's when the end times come.
And normally that's kind of representative of the plasma discharge.
Same shape. Yeah.
It's the same sort of
like the Egyptian headpiece we saw earlier too.
Yep. So we're starting to get into this is all starting to tie together. Again, this is just another Hebrew thing, and the menorah is here, but where's the hands and stuff? So you can see how over time, no matter what religion it is or anything, things change to be a little bit more standardized for everyone's consumption. Because no one's going to pray to a menorah that has hands, but you'll pray to a menorah. And every religion is not. There's no religion in this world that is excluded from this. Here we go with the cross, the papal cross, and I was showing earlier.
Right. So basically, every religion is
based
symbolism is based on the same. Yeah.
Based upon this one event, and that's so. Now that we're kind of all seeing this, like we can kind of not speed through this, but you can see this a little bit faster. So, this is kind of like the stairway to the Jacob's ladder ones that were, again, we have the cross within the circle. And this is what I really like about this era of art, because they started to get really creative with hiding this stuff. So as you can see from this circle, these, I guess you could call them serpents, they kind of round out, and they make those circles that sit on the side of those things without making it. Yep. And so these guys started to get really, really smart with control.
Were they getting smart, or was the knowledge being lost?
I don't think it was being lost. I think it was being held. So I think that I would call it smarter because they were learning to control their population more by subtracting symbols, even though from each generation, like if they were to, like with the menorah one, we could go back to this one. So say my great grandmother experienced the menorah with the hands, that that image, but they tell me this is a new image. For my kids, the menorah without the hands is the only one that they'll have.
Correct. Yeah.
But they haven't given us more knowledge. They've actually taken knowledge from us and given us more interpretation. So that's what I think is happening now is we keep getting more information about stuff, but we're not told how to apply it. So right now you can go, I did this for years, allegedly. I would just go into BitTorrent and books. There's so many books you could find. But if you just download books, you're not gaining any knowledge. You have the knowledge, but you're not able to pass that knowledge because you're just holding on to that knowledge. And that's what I think they're essentially trying to do, even to this day, is give you information, but not allow you to apply it to the thing. That's why I say perspective is such a big thing, because just having someone else's perspective allows you to connect things that are simple. It's just that from your point of view, it got a little bit weird. So then we can go into these other ones, and then we can get into, this is my favorite one. So as you can see, the legs are crossed, as we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, this is very, and it's making its way into pop culture now. Like, Thrasher, the skateboard. Yep. I mean, that was kind of the underground when I was growing up. That was the, yeah, they had the magazine and everything, but like the actual, their products and stuff wasn't mainstream at all. But now, we have a 13-year-old cousin, and that's all she wants to wear is Thrasher gear, and all these little kids now all they see is Thrasher gear, and it's this. And we get the same thing. So if we follow the as above, so below, you have the horns that point up. You have one of his arms that points down. But if you look at his elbow, that arm still makes the gesture down. So you're still getting you're still getting the down. And like I said, when we were talking about this earlier, it's in his lap, which in the previous things, at the bottom of these discharges, there's an 8. It's a figure 8, and as you can see in his lap, he's creating this with his anatomy, and it's in the symbol of this 8. And it's weird that, in the story of, the biblical stories real quick, we can get into, Satan is an acronym for Saturn. People relate Saturn and Satan as the same thing because time
Lucifer was cast to earth to rule this earth. Jumping around really fast, sorry. And he controls time. So for him to have that figure 8 in his lap, and then it relates to the plasma discharges and stuff, for me, it shows that these people on different levels understood the science of what was happening before they applied the imagery to it. It's just over time they had the opportunity to apply it. For me, this is it's a control mechanism, because a lot of people see this and they don't want to disobey God because they will end up in Satan's hands. But who knows? Maybe the truth is, but it just seems like all the evidence points to this event that happened where the imagery came from. So it's not supposed to say like, hey, like if you don't live your good life, like Satan's gonna get you. It's more supposed to be a warning of like, hey, this imagery ties back to stuff that you should have imprinted on your primal DNA to scare you. And that's the bigger story that I get from it, is like this is supposed to, the powers that be look at this as something that is supposed to warn us, but over time it's become a control mechanism. Now we're going to get into the Southwest. Again, Squatting Man. These are going to be quick. So the Squatting Man. Again, so what I was talking about is at the very bottom of the left, so you see the torus, the plasmoid, I guess it's called. So you have that 8, that figure 8, and then you see the horns at the very top. I mean,
yeah.
You know, this is just imagery that is...
You could overlap them.
Exactly. They add stuff onto this, and I say it for control. They don't want to tell us the truth. They want to show us the truth. They just don't want to tell us about it. So again, Arizona...
It's a simple truth.
Exactly. But that simple truth changes everything. The Thunderbird, you know, that's a very interesting... You know, when you start to look into this, the Native American people were very, very prominent on the Thunderbird. And you're like,
where is this from?
I'm not sure exactly where this is from, but this is a South American one. So I have them kind of staggered in certain categories. This was a Southwestern American one. So this is an American Southwest depiction of what's going
Arizona, Nevada.
Yeah, New Mexico, that kind of area. Okay. So it makes you show like these guys knew they're worshiping a thunderbird in the same pose as everything else, trying to tell a deeper story, as opposed to like, oh no, we believe in this bird that has thunder. Like, no, they're trying to show different generations. You know, I think this is way more effective to show your ancestors. Like, if you wanted to teach your kids about the truth, some people are different, but I would vote this way versus the Lucifer way, trying to scare my kids into being like, hey, when you see this imagery, it's pretty much donezo, as opposed to teaching them like, hey, when this comes up, we all have to be on the same page because this is what's happening. We're not trying to scare you with this crazy story. Here it is. So we keep going. This would be weird if it was or this would be normal if it was Southwest, but I included this one because this is on Hawaii. This is on the main island in Hawaii. So we're getting the same thing on an island in the middle of nowhere. There's no connection, The land bridge didn't go through Hawaii. Again, I love this one because these guys weren't even playing no games. They said, we're just going to put the legs on the sun to let you guys know what's really going on. And the top left sun is one phase of it. The bottom left sun is, they included the squatting pose with the circle bags inside of them. Again, and this is where I really like to dig into this stuff, because now we're not just getting one sign. We're getting multiple signs on one wall. So you have the squatting man, you have the circles, and now you have this weird thing that goes above the squatting man, and it looks like a box, right? Like a house. Like the squatting man lives in this house, like a serpent almost too. So it'd be totally cool if it was just this one incident, but as we can go on, look at this one.
Well, if you go back for a second, this could just be random, but is this them, and then this is the sky, right?
Yep. These stories make a lot more sense when you start applying this story to it, because it's less of a, oh, look, we're just going to draw a bunch of horses and deers and stuff. You start to see the story that they're trying to tell. These weren't just random paintings that, I think a lot of the indication that they try to show, like when I was in classes, was that they'd be like, hey, this cave was open for about 3,000 years that these people were traveling in and out of it. So we don't know if this painting was at the beginning of the 3,000 years or the end of it, but they would say that all these paintings coalesced into this time frame as opposed to this one incident. And so that's why now that we know this story a little bit better, we can look at this and go, man, they're trying to tell a moment. This is the closest thing to a picture that we can get. And if you look at it, it's chaos on the ground, like you were saying, chaos on the ground, images in the sky. And we can keep going. You have the squatting man. You have the
that one really looks like it on the left, right?
Yeah,
there.
we get in, and then it's in the house too. I call it the sun house or the house of whatever. We keep going. There's the first. I think this is the first version that they found of, or the oldest version of the Thunderbird god, and this is West Texas. I think that one's cool because it just kind of it shows how simple. For me, it kind of shows like the urgency. Like, we're not here to show detail. We just want you guys to see this now. Keep going. More.
Kind of like when you leave your business cards everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like it marketing.
Yep. This one, a lot of people try to say like, oh, look, it's a lizard. But if we start to look closely, we can see the shape, and you'll see it kind of progress as we go further. But the head of that, it's not really a lizard. It's a triangle. And remember I was talking about triangle face?
Mm-hmm. It's just weathered.
Yeah. We'll start to see it come a little bit better. So again, you have the Thunderbirds on the left. Right in the middle, you have that hand. So
yeah, that's that other Thunderbird that you see a lot. Yeah.
And then there's the hand right there, and then you have the double circles too. So now we're starting to see the entire picture in every almost situation. Again, you have the face in the middle. You have, what's that one look like? Looks like some DNA to me.
Yeah, it's spiral.
We have the tree of life, and then we have these bags. And these are going to be really, really important later on, because this is what's going to connect this global event. They call them the handbags of the gods. So again, the double circles, the squatting man, pretty simple. And here we go with triangle head. And this is where, for me, it gets like, well, yeah, now these people were talking about the same thing. This is South America, and the last one was Siberia. How do those two places connect in that day and age to do a triangle head man?
Right. Yeah, and I just want to point out, because these are what ancient alien people think that are signs of aliens, but this makes more sense if one event happened in the sky for everyone to see than aliens going to each civilization. Yep. You know what I'm saying?
But for them, it could have been a sign from the aliens,
as long as they have no
from their
idea.
Point of view. So, and again, triangle face, a little bit more stylized. We're starting to get the sun flares from above. You get the owl eyes. It's almost like they try to wrap a bunch of things into one thing to get the big picture out. Again, we get into some weird things, and you could see how elongated those things are. They're not trying to. And this is where we get the whole like, hey, we're trying to talk to the gods and stuff. They're trying to show us that this was not of human. These weren't humans doing this stuff. Again, there's triangle face, triangle head, the squatting.
The dots and everything.
Yeah, there's certain ones that really stand out to me, and this is one of them, where it's like,
why would you have dots right there? Like, it doesn't make sense.
There's something going on. There's something that is going on. So in the Southwest, they even do this into their rugs. So you see as above, so below. It's up.
The pattern. Yeah.
And then you have the circles on the side. If you go right into the middle, this is a stop point in New Mexico. And they did the same thing. It's a little bit more different, but you have the mother god kind of squatting. It looks like she's giving birth to the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, we get into now we have the sun. That's kind of basics. But see this triangle right in the middle? How it's not attached to anything? So I think right above it, you had the squatting man. I think the triangle was the thing that came after it. So I think, because this was a phase, this happened, it shot up, and then it kind of dissipated, and then the next thing kind of happened. This was a cycle that happened. So I think the triangle head was a version after the squatting man, and it makes kind of sense why in this last one there's like this imagery of kind of birthing. Because I think some people, from their perspectives, saw it as, the rebirth of something else. The destruction, the death, and the rebirth, the full cycle. Again, so this is where we start to get into some really, I don't like to say it, but primitive kind of in the moment art. So we're seeing the same Jacob's Ladder thing, but just way, way primitive. And I'm thinking that maybe this is an area that didn't have as much time to get what they really wanted to get out. They just needed to say, like, hey, we saw this one thing go straight up, had a bunch of lines off of it, and it seemed like maybe that's as far as they got. Mm-hmm. We go into this one. This is Belize, Central America. We get the same thing. As above, so below. You got the middle. You start to see it. There's the face. This is Mayan. You have the two balls with the face. Now we're just gonna start getting into. At this point, for me, this is where I started to get the imagery just became too much. Where it's like, okay, I think we got it. But then the languages started to pop out to me, and so if we look at the sun, which is right in the middle, like the sun has that X behind it. So even in their language, they're talking about the truth of what's going on in the sky. And then if you look at that top left one, that is their symbol for Lord. And that's the plasma discharge sign.
Yeah, don't look at it as an actual face. Like, just,
yeah.
You could, when you can look at different things from negative space or different perspective. Like,
so, these guys were talking truth, and now we're getting to the Aztec.
Same thing.
So
up, down,
balls
right
on
through the middle.
Yep, balls on the side. It gets pretty standard when now you have the hand, or you could call it the hand. They have the same thing. You have the cross in the middle, the X. You have the X below.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Gets into some pretty crazy stuff. They symbolize the sun. So what you're saying, like, remember back in the day when we thought these guys were just doing crazy cave paintings? Well, it seems like this guy is playing a drum that symbolizes things coming out of a cup, so turbulence. And it's like he's playing this song to the god who's also playing it
to the sun. And this was represented in their end calendar. So what they're trying, they're trying to show, like, I think they're trying to recreate like a celebration that symbolizes an earthquake or something like that, where the humans play this song that imitates a earthquake or a discharge for their gods. You have the Aztec calendar, and the whole Mayan Aztec calendar, the way that people perceive those things, I think we're a little bit wrong. Because when you talk about a sun, you talk about an end calendar, so that their world ended in 2012, supposedly by their calendar. If you take that and you kind of use that as a marker point, that's a pretty good marker point for that civilization to say, like, hey, the sun's going to start acting up around that time. Yeah, they didn't get it like, hey, the sun's going to flare up on 2012 on this day. But how I look at it is like when you pass a big city on a highway, there's multiple stops to get off on. You don't have to get off on the first stop to get to that city. You can go throughout it, and you still experience that city. So I think they're trying to indicate, hey, 2012 is the very first stop for this, for this ride. Start seeing weird stuff happen.
Exactly. It's
and I would give them, like, if they're trying to guess that far out, I'd like give them 100-year window, not just 2012 or whatever.
Yeah. So I thought it was pretty crazy that people were like, hey, it's 2012 and we made it past it, and it's like, yeah, but these guys were calculating this, a long time ago. I think we should give them a little bit more time. So now we're going to get into the Dogon people. The Dogon people, for me, are the most interesting people in the entire face of this world because they have the oldest documented tribal cohesion. So these guys have been around since ever. These are the people who say that the beings came out of the water to talk to them and give them their spirit, their knowledge. These are the same people who mapped the Pleiades around some of their stuff. And this is a southwestern African tribe. These guys have been cut off since before the time of the the Old Testament. Since the Old Testament, these guys have been doing their own thing by themselves. So again, you have the horns.
Yeah, that one's weird to me because even if you're trying to depict someone, regardless of the horns, even just the beard, like wouldn't they have like a mustache or something, like a full beard? Like I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but back then I don't think it was a style, to just have your beard like that, like, and then this,
and then I like to
circle.
Yeah, the circle. Like there's always little things, and then that's a version of the Jacob's Ladder thing. Mm-hmm. So these little clues you start to see everywhere. So this is how they mapped it. This is an actual cave carving that they had where they had the cross, and you can see that Orion. They had the 7 dots around the solar trinity. These guys knew about the solar system way before anyone else. And no one knows how. Still to this day, it's one of the biggest mysteries, and they don't allow people to really come in. You can go in and you can witness their stuff, but they will not cooperate with sharing their secret. They're kind of like the Hopi people. I have a few friends I grew up around them, their whole families, but I can go to certain ceremonies that they have, but there's about 3 of them that no matter who you are, you just cannot go in. And again, so you have the same image. We'll go again. So this is where it gets pretty cool. This is one of their caves, and you can see you have the squatting man, you have the stairway, you have some pretty cool stuff. Where is the one that I am looking for? It's right. Okay. So if you go all the way to the far right, that column.
Oh, right there.
Yeah, that column is very, as you can see from the other columns in this picture, that column depicts in dimensions. Like that is a very good drawing, and it shows like columns, not just like branches. It shows the roundness of what they're trying to see or show. And I think that's amazing because all these other ones just seem like kind of dead branches on a tree.
Mm-hmm. Well, kind of like you said, there it is.
Yep.
Above, below, squatting man again.
And so at this point, we're kind of around the entire world. This is happening everywhere. And you see
this is a very famous, because they think this is, these are astronauts.
Yep.
Is what it is. Their helmets and the antennas. And
so then when you know those big eyes that we were talking about, it kind of makes a little bit more sense that these things happen.
And even going back to the guy's beard that we showed earlier, that's like the same symbolism.
And now we're getting into just really old symbols that just mean a lot. So you have these double circles, but then you have these triangles on the far right again. And I always think it's weird that when you see some of these things, it's almost like it's a picture. So a lot of these columns are on the right-hand side. So it's just weird that they have the same thing. So there's a triangle face again. Now this is one of the oldest cave paintings that they found, and you can see it's the same thing. This seems like more of like a squatting woman.
Yeah, it looks like porn, like cave porn.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
So we got
but yeah,
was beaten off.
But if you look in the middle of her column, like her situation,
spine or whatever,
yeah, you see that you see that column, and that column is
like why the hell would they draw that?
And they have these triangles off to the side
or on the legs or whatever.
So it's
weird. Yeah, fishnet stockings. They kind of look like it.
Fishnet stockings.
They knew about something we didn't know. So we keep going. We're getting into some pagan stuff. This is just all imagery. This is you know, what most people would say is Santa Claus. Same imagery, crossed legs, the horns.
So Santa's plasma. That's how he can move around so quickly. You hear it here first on Be Advised podcast.
He has plasma power. Again, the imagery, and I wanted to show you this one because the second one down, that's the same image that as above, so below, but the name of it is the name of the goddess. And it's, they're showing the same thing. And I think it's funny because they can't lie. And if you go to the top one, in the middle, the sign of God. Yep. Yeah. It's a sign of God, and that's one of the images that the plasma discharge shows. So when we get to this stuff, you see Earth. These are moon glyphs, but look at the one right next to Earth, balance. It's funny that they use these words for this stuff because they know about it. Look at life. Dark is these are all. This is a little bit more pagan, and that's why I say sometimes you go to the pagan source to get the most information because they're just going to be honest with you. They're telling you that's how they.
Yeah, even looking at the moon, they don't. Why do they added these dots? They don't need them. They're not really doing anything.
Yeah, our moon doesn't have moons.
Of course, it looks like a car.
And so signs again, Taurus is pretty clear. They got that straight from it. He's holding those sprites like I showed earlier.
It's same shape.
Yep.
That makes sense because it's Zeus. Yeah.
So he's
totally.
You have in the middle. You have the sign for human. Remember, if you drop plasma into the vacuum around the top middle, you get the same thing. So this is Greek.
So even our alphabet, even the way we write things is.
It's almost like it's kind of coded into us. And then look at that one. That's a beautiful one for what would happen if the one right to that one purify. So these all coincide with what's really going on. The same imagery.
You know what those also remind me of? Those tools you use and you can hit them and they.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, isn't that weird how that's the same shape and everything too?
It's funny because we're starting to get to the good stuff, like these old societies. Look at Poseidon holding that ball. Why was he holding that ball? Well, now it makes sense.
Or like that. There's that famous one too, where Jesus is sitting there with God, and they call them antennas, and it's just a round sphere.
Yep.
And they think that's alien technology, but this can prove different.
You have the ladder again, just a different style of representation. You have now we're getting to Göbekli Tepe, and Joe Rogan fans unite. People are going, oh, this is the oldest area of the world right now, civilization-wise, that they're trying to trace. And of course, you're seeing the same thing: the squatting woman, the mushroom head. Same thing. That's
in the temple, huh?
Yep, this is.
Well, even go back to that lady. So, if you're drawing your woman or whatever, this is the most unflattering, position, you know what I'm saying? No one would draw anyone like that.
And to give her a mushroom head.
Yeah. I was like, she had saggy cheeks or something. But yeah.
So then we have the same, the squatting man in a different representation. Some people say it's a lizard. It's not. And this is a cool one because they've been trying to say that these in Göbekli Tepe are fastens, so you can lock these blocks together. I mean, clearly, if this guy's wearing it on his chest, this is a guy from Australia, the Aborigines. No, this is just decoration. They're showing the same thing. You have the line through. Again, it's a little bit of a stylized because it's almost a reverse. So it's not pointing up and down, but it's pointing down. It's the same thing. Again, Göbekli Tepe, same thing. And so here's the purses. So this is where a shock who appears on Joe Rogan a lot. This is where they kind of hit their wall for so many years. They said, look, Göbekli Tepe has these purses at the top. Those purses seem to indicate a situation. This is ancient Babylon, same purse. This, Central South America, same purse. How is this happening, and why is this image, out of all things, collating to these things? And these are all, as you can see in the Central South American one, that's Kukulkan. He's related to the feathered wing dragon who brings destruction and a new day to the world. And you also have the vulture in the far left of Göbekli Tepe, and then you have like a version of the crab under it, symbolizing eating. Those things eat death, so the rebirth, I guess you could say. And then what you have in the middle is the Babylonian,
So this isn't proof of the Anunnaki right here.
I would say that the Anunnaki is maybe something that happened alongside with this, or so the Anunnaki is a whole different.
It's a whole different monster. Yeah, we don't have time to go in on that one. But
It gets a little different. Again, same signs. These are Egyptian symbols. So as you can see, you have the sign, you have the 8, you have the X, but the big one that I like with this one is the top. That one to the right, the hut. So remember in those images that they were closed in by those things.
Right. Yeah.
So now we're seeing this
language used for it.
This was, and that's why I say I think there was a more of a universal language that was used on this earth before, because a lot of these symbols are coming up in different languages. And I get that they might have been using them the same thing, but when you start to look at them and their meanings, they're the same meanings too. So maybe they just had a conference where like, hey, we can agree that these kind of mean the same thing. But it seems like at some point, these civilizations were on the same page of communication of something. We're getting to the Egyptians now. I'm trying to go a little bit older so we can start to see the depth. Again, we have the holding the balls. You have the as above. He's pointing down.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And that's Horus. We're getting into some crazy stuff. They put her on top of the dragon so she can be mighty.
Yeah, but even you can see the same shape. Yeah.
Yep, same thing. Keep going. So now we're going to get into this. So they depict that as, the sun, the winged god, holding everything. But when you turn it into that, you start to see that these guys knew, like I'm saying, like this was all very common knowledge at a certain level of understanding in these societies. So we're seeing the same things, just depicted differently. And if we take that right where those wings are on the bottom part, and you just look at so if you look at the right side of that picture in the bottom one, that looks like the initial Big Bang blast from earlier when they're trying to show us. So exactly. So they're showing us one side of the Big Bang, but the Big Bang is actually a double-sided situation. And that's where it gets crazy, is because we're on one side of the Big Bang, but what's on the other side? Maybe that is, all right, some funky time, maybe that is our parallel universe. We don't know what's on the other side of that horizon. We keep going, and now we're getting to some interesting stuff with Egypt and the theories behind some of how Egypt had this knowledge and why they did. Most people think these pyramids were before the Egyptians. So, the Egyptians might have inherited the pyramids. And that's a crazy concept to think.
That's what I believe.
Yeah, and I mean, when you start to look at this stuff, it makes sense that there was the cycle that we know as ancient societies is not the oldest cycle. I think there was a cycle before what we know, the Babylonians, the Egyptians. I think there was a cycle before that. Who knows what they were, how they conducted themselves, but I think there was a cycle before that, and I think they were the ones who did stuff like the pyramids, Göbekli Tepe, these really big, world-changing structures.
Yeah, man, Göbekli Tepe is a fascinating one because they haven't even excavated the whole thing yet, from what I understand. And
Yep.
building something like that and then purposely covering it up, like it's a giant feat.
Yeah, you wouldn't do something like, you wouldn't create a world wonder that makes your whole civilization essentially stop to create it just to put it underground within it being new. Like it wasn't like we're kind of over this thing. We've been a city or an area for thousands of years. Like this, it shows like there's even parts of it that weren't finished and then it got covered up. So it gets why would you do that? So we get into some possible theories. When you look at the Tesla Tower next to the pyramids, there is some pretty striking similarities on how the science of these structures would work theoretically. Everyone knows that the Tesla Tower did work on a smaller scale. When you ramp it up, it's the same thing.
It worked. There's old pictures of like people that had it installed, and it would work. And I don't know if people have seen Finding Tesla, that show on Discovery or whatever. It was so cool. They had a little Tesla coil and they had an RC boat, no power to it, and they could run it and all sorts of things. And they're standing there like there's no
copper industry put an end to that.
Well, all of our industries put it into that. That's how it was ended, right?
So a lot of people think sound waves, maybe frequencies. It's capturing this stuff. I don't know how this would kind of collate into the plasma thing, but I've figured, with Egypt having all this stuff and they're pointing towards energy, they moved all these stuff. They seem to be the people out of everyone who has the clues to trace to, what do they call it, reverse engineer, to kind of reverse engineer their timeline. When you look into Göbekli and stuff, it's kind of so far gone that we can't grab some of this stuff. But the pyramids are still intact. We have to dig so far down to get to the bottom of Göbekli, and there's just so many things that are in the way. So when we're starting to get to this thing, at the bottom you can see this is the Hindu tradition that I can't pronounce it, Vajra.
Vajra, yeah. Maybe.
That looks just like those sprites, and then the Chandra, there's the sun or the moon, and that dot.
Yeah, even that.
And exactly, and then there's
even just
So then there's your vase, So these things are everywhere. So we get into, look at this representation. Look at Triangle Face over there, who's in the little house. And this was the first representation of Kali. And as you can see, Kali, the god of destruction, over here. And you can see in her hand, she's holding a skull. But that's a lot like a circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
circle within circles. Too.
Yeah. So
and you're standing on top.
That was the Thuggee.
What a weird picture,
cult,
though.
Right?
Yeah, this is the.
So I mean, and this one is like this image can go through everywhere. So again, you see this the same thing. You have the drop down in the middle, like the one line. You have the as above, so below. I mean, this is all the same thing. And this one, they represent the balls with fire, which is beautiful. Again, holding the tridents that Poseidon and those guys were holding, but they're really just sprites. They're holding the power to, electricity, thunderbolts of the gods. That's a big phrase. This one is the one that struck me the most. When I saw that picture of the face in the sky, the squatting man, but you could see it as the picture.
Yeah, that's what I pictured.
This is
was one of these things.
This is exactly what I pictured.
Japanese kind of samurais.
And see, and if you guys don't think that these things are still applying to us today, look at this is modern day yoga.
Right, and it balances themselves, and
This is squatting man. They're trying to represent the same things, and they say when these plasma discharges happened, that there was large ohms, like ohm frequencies that were released at these times. So if you think about these people that were high in the mountains, they were getting the most pure frequencies, and in their tradition, their thing is they go, Om. They were hearing this, and now they're trying to recreate this as a part of their spirituality. And there's the bell. And if you look at the squatting man, it kind of looks like a bell too. I think. All right, so this is how I kind of wanted to wrap all this craziness up, is when you look at this, you don't see too much craziness, right? You just see normal human. But as we can see, as above, so below, this thing is, and this is why it's kind of hard to put a wrap up on this, because I don't think this wraps up until it wraps up. And that sounds scary, but it's the truth. And this is the human skeleton. This is, what you're looking at is the Nile Delta. You would think, as above, so below. This can't macro itself, but, it does. And I don't have the ones that lay next to each other, but if you take the second skeleton right there on your left-hand side and you follow it, we're going to go a little bit left, a little bit right, left, right. And if you look at the Nile Delta, if that's your brain, then, the top part is your brain. We're going to go a little bit right, left, right, and then we can open it up. And, not to be vulgar or anything, but it's showing, these are things that happen. This is, I would say it shows that nature is either conscious or that nature has a weird pattern of design.
Plasma. If you think about it, we're all carbon, creatures or whatever. We all came from the Big Bang, gases and stuff like that. So it's not a far reach to say we emulate the same thing.
And then the beautiful thing is that for whatever a creator or whatever has put the archetype for us to develop as humans, or anything to develop, it has this pattern where even as humans, we share the same curvature as the Nile Delta. And the Nile Delta, when you do like ley lines and stuff, it's mapped as the center of Earth's land masses. So at the center of Earth's land masses, you have a perfect representation of our structure, which makes us different because we do stand up, upright at most time versus other things in this world. So it kind of sets us apart. And it's weird that the one place that has these Egyptian pyramids is at the center of what would be our brain, which is at the center of what we, our landmass. And I think it's because they knew about something bigger, the civilization that was before the Egyptians that we know. Because when you apply the squatting man, the experiment that Pratt did, to our Milky Way galaxy, but when you look at the side, we're looking at the same thing. So when we're looking at the Big Bang, our Milky Way galaxy, our solar system, and then it comes down to us, and then it comes down to our Earth, and then if you look at like a person's magnetic fields, it's just the same thing. And it gets into this weird thing of, where did the ancient civilization's knowledge really end if they knew this much about the solar system back then? This is, I really try to come in here and show kind of like what ancient civilizations have done to kind of like be better than us. But when I got to all this new information about Greenland, them finding these particles around there that relates to the sun and stuff, it just seems like all stories kind of have to end with this huge, this is where we are. Because I think that's essentially where you can kind of only take history and anthropology once you get to a certain point of truth. Is just like, here it is, and can we learn from it, and what can we do from that knowledge? I mean, because that's everything. One other thing that I saw is like, if you watch Guardians of the Galaxy, like you'll see that they have like this, it's crazy, they have this weird intradimensional way of teleporting, and they come out as hexagons. And when you look into plasma energy and stuff, you can see that hexagons are actually one of the most efficient ways for discharging plasma. And
also in nature too, bees and
when you're
flowers, and it happens in nature as well.
So, I mean, it just seems like this whole world is a little bit more electric and involved with a little bit more plasma than we know, and that I think a lot of people should be a little bit more curious as to gravity. I think people should really look into gravity and kind of understand the limitations, and where even mainstream science still goes, oh yeah, but we have to make an exception for that part of gravity. But when everything in the electric universe and the plasma universe kind of thing, plasma energy, it fits it without making any rule exceptions. It just fits. And I think that's what a lot of people should look into, is like, hey, we're going into this new age. I honestly think that our grandkids are only going to know this. They're going to look at gravity and go, yeah, that was cute.
Yeah, gravity has so many holes in it, but that's another podcast. I mean, we'll get you back on there for that episode, but yeah, awesome. Thank you very much, Chris. I know I'm a believer now, at least just with the, this takes place precedence over Ancient Aliens, because I was a big Ancient Alien guy, because what you showed us, across all cultures and stuff like that. But this makes so much more sense.
It's a better explanation.
It's a way better explanation, and I think people should get into it, and it might unlock new technologies and stuff like that. Yeah, man. Thank you.
Thank you guys. It's been fun.
Yeah. All right. From Robbie, Ron, and Chris, be advised.
Be advised.
Be very advised.
Chris is smart.
Yeah.